Hello and welcome to this edition of Consciousness Raising Online. I'm going to jump into this right away because there's a lot of information I want to impart today. And this is such a serious subject that I wanted to make sure that I did it thoroughly because um, just the title in of itself, the idea of what? Murder? Yeah, we're talking about murders and assassinations. And here's the thing. A lot of times there's this perception that Africa is in the shape that it's in because of so much corruption, corrupt leaders, and like every country according to the West is every African country is nothing but corrupt leaders that do nothing but steal all the money from the people. And what's so terrible about that is that it's not true. First of all, not every country. There's corrupt leaders, but here's the reality. How did they get to be that way? Now, we've covered in the past the how Africa was divided up among European countries, right? But what we haven't dealt with clearly is how those same countries, when African countries and African people in different countries started pushing for independence to get the yoke off of their necks, the strategies that were used to defeat that and hold it back. And one of the strongest of the strategies was murder. It was assassinations. And everybody from the French to the Italians to the Germans to the Portuguese to the British, all of those countries, they murdered leader after leader after leader. When they didn't do it directly, they had people do it for them. But what this did was it kept the entire continent in a constant state of disruption. And that far outweighs any individuals of a country who might have stolen a little money or been a little corrupt. No, no, no. We're talking about a strategy that was designed to basically disrupt the countries, the people, and their efforts to become independent, to stand on their own. And I'm going to show you in the next few over the next few minutes exactly what I'm talking about, because this is so serious and so overlooked that we really, really, really got to take a look at it from this point of view, that murder was a part of the strategies that has kept Africa in check, that has kept it from advancing. It put things so far back that it was like every time we took two steps forward, the murder took it a step back. And I want you to keep it in mind that just like goes on in our communities in the United States, we have a serious issue with violence, right? I live in Chicago, and they're always talking from your present resident to others. They talk about the violence, the killing that goes on in our city, in many of these cities, right? Well, if we think that it affects our families and communities here, what do you think it does to countries when they kill the leaders? And in some cases, I'm going to show you, they kill leaders over and over again. Every time a leader would step up, they would kill him. Okay? The symbol that you're looking at right now, I'm going to come back to that, but it's the symbol for Gladio. And if you've never heard of Gladio, there's a reason for that. But Gladio, I'll just tell you from this point, it is a secret assassination bureau. Okay? We'll talk about it as we get into it. Because this bureau is already been identified as being responsible for at least two African leaders. Okay? Um, we look back, and I'm going to go back only to roughly 1960, because we can go back further than that, but it's so many since 1960, it ain't funny. Okay, one of the first, of course, was Patrice Lumumba. Okay, now Patrice Lumumba, he was the first prime minister of the Independent Democratic Republic of the Congo. Then it was called Republic of the Congo, and uh, but he only got a chance to be there be the uh, first prime minister from June to September of 1960. They came at him so fast and so strong. He had been prime minister uh, coming into the situation. He help bring the Congo out of the out from under the foot of uh, of Portugal. But what they did to Patrice Lumumba was just outrageous. They took him, they had him snatched up and arrested. He was begging for help from the United States and Britain, and they ignored him. Then he went to the Soviet Union, and he went to them, and they said, "Okay, we'll help you," but the fix was already in. Uh, the French, the British, and the U.S. intelligence agencies set him up, got him, took him, disappeared him, and eventually killed him. Okay, and all of these I'm going to mention. I would want you to go do your own research. You should know about them and what happened with them, and look at what happened to their countries. Okay, some of them I'm just going to mention briefly. This is, and hopefully I'll be able to say their names correctly. This is Joseph Bamina from uh, he was the prime minister of Burundi. Prime Minister of Burundi. And what's interesting about him is that he, of course, went straight under the microscope all the way to the United States. And I'm going to show you what I mean. This is several pages from the CIA pages, okay? Where they had him under straight up surveillance and everything, and they were tracking him. He was assassinated. Okay. Now this is Burundi, and you might want to look up Burundi if you don't know where it is, because Burundi went through a thing where Bomina was killed. Uh, this is Louis. Let's try to say his name correctly. This is Louis Rwagasore. Rwagasore. Okay. He was assassinated. He's also from Burundi. Okay. Uh, actually, they had three in a row that were killed. Three in a row. Boom, boom, boom. That really messed up their country. Every time they had elected somebody, next thing you know, and I'm not saying the CIA directly, but the CIA was involved, knocking them out, knocking them out. And why do you think Burundi? That's why you should go look up Burundi. See where is Burundi? What would make it's a small country? What would make it so important that the CIA would be involved in all of that? And why did they keep killing their leaders? You know, it's questions you need to ask because they were killing them like crazy. Here's a case of somebody I really think is really interesting. His name was Sylvanus Olympio. Sylvanus Olympio. He was the first president of the Republic of Togo. And yeah, they killed him too. Killed him too. Again, you can look it up. Don't believe me, just go look him up. Sylvanus Olympio. And here's a deep story behind him. Okay? That was in 1963. Then in 1966, this is John Aguiyi Iransi. He was president of the Republic of Nigeria. Okay? Go look him up. He was the first one. They killed him too. All right. Wow. And you're seeing these faces, right? You never saw these faces before, did you? This is I'm just gonna say the best I can. His name was he got a long first name, but part of his first name is Ali, and last name is Shermaki. Shermaki. Ali Shermaki. He was president of the Republic of Somalia. And as we know, Somalia has been through hell, still going through hell. And part of that reason is that they kept killing the leaders. He was president of Somalia. They killed him very quickly. And then they had different so-called warlords who were fighting over territory. And not only the United States, but France and some others, they've been over there messing with Somalia for a long time. Okay? And yes, seriously. So look him up to Shermaki. All right, now here is brother. His name was Eduardo Monlane. He was the head of a movement called Frelimo. Now, when I wrote a poem years ago called "Who Killed McDuffie," Monlane is in that poem because Eduardo Monlane is the head of Frelimo movement. He was killed by the Portuguese chapter of Gladio. And I showed you the logo for them a few minutes ago. I'll show it to you again. But look at where Mozambique is. Now, what happened was this. After World War II, Before the CIA became the CIA, it was called something else, OSS or something. Anyway, the United States head of its intelligence agency, along with the British, they got together with a Nazi general who had been head of the intelligence agency in Germany, in Nazi Germany. And this Nazi German general had a secret police squad that he called werewolves. And the deal was that they pretended to be regular citizens in the day, and at night they went out killing communists, the werewolves. When the United States intelligence agency and the British, they brought this Nazi general over to the United States to a place called Fort Hunt. You can look it up. They wined and dined him, and they made a deal. They sent him back to Germany with United States military assistance, and his mission was to revive the werewolves. Only they weren't to be called werewolves anymore. They were to be called gladiators. And the program was called Gladio. And Gladio didn't just exist in Germany. They branched out into Portugal and France and Italy. And this is their logo, okay? Silent service, I believe is what the Latin says at the bottom. But they were responsible for killing several. Well, let me say it like this. It is now known that they killed several African leaders, including Eduardo Mondlane. And you can find information about Gladio, Gladio. And Gladio, they existed then, they exist now. Interesting thing about this, by the way, is the money that got them started, $200 million, came from the Rockefeller Foundation and the Mellon Foundation. Mellon being Mellon, for those that don't know about the Mellons. Some people over in the Northeast in Pennsylvania and stuff, they know Mellon because Mellon banks are everywhere over there. Okay, but they got $200 million to start. I'm like, well, shoot, I could start a pretty big clandestine organization with $200 million coming out of World War II. But they've been operating for a long time. Okay, and I'll tell you about some more that they killed. All right, Gladio. Here's a brother by the name of. Let me try and say it correctly because a lot of these names, you have to forgive me if I don't say them exactly right. But his name was Abid Amani Karume. He was the president of the Republic of Zanzibar. Now, you can look up Zanzibar to see where it is. You should. You know, one of the Earth, Wind, and Fire songs that I loved was called Zanzibar. You might check that song out. It's a beautiful song. But this was the president of Zanzibar, and he was assassinated. And again, you have to say, why did they keep killing these people? They killed them because they were threats. They were threats. They were leading their people to independence. Here's somebody else who's mentioned in my poem who killed McDuffie. Excuse me. His name was Amilcar Cabral. And Amilcar Cabral was he was never president of the country. He was one of the leaders for independence for Guinea. But he was a Pan Africanist and very well known and well respected in the African liberation movements. And he was another who was killed. Um, the credit has been given um, to Gladio, okay, and others, because he was a bad brother. um, this is Richard Ratsimhandraba. He was the president of the Republic of Madagascar. Um, now we don't hear much about Madagascar except for Disney's animated movies, which I beef about because of this. I think they've had two or three of them, right? But they had these movies about these cartoon with these animated movies, cartoons about Madagascar, and all they feature is the animals. They don't show no people there. You would not know that Madagascar is off the coast of Africa, and that is black people, because you don't see no black people. You don't see no people at all in the Madagascar movies. And I've done this. I've asked children who have watched all of Madagascar. They love all the Madagascar movies, and I say, "Well, where's Madagascar?" They say, "I don't know. It's an island somewhere." And I say, "Who lives on Madagascar?" They say, "The animals." I say, "What about the people?" They say, most of them say, "I don't know about no people that live in Madagascar." This brother was the president of Madagascar, but dig this: he was only president for 6 days in 1975, and he was assassinated. And his assassination led to a civil war. See, we don't never hear about this stuff. Now, how you gonna do all these movies about Madagascar and you don't never mention this kind of stuff? Okay? There's a country called Chad, and over in Chad, they've had their share of problems. This is Francois Ngarta Tombal Baye. He was the president of Chad, and in April of 1975, after he had some of the country's leading military officers arrested for involvement in an alleged coup, a group of soldiers killed him and secretly buried his body in an area called Faye. Yeah, that was the other thing that I ran across a lot of. A lot of times when they would kill a leader, they would bury their body somewhere and not tell anybody. Just ignorant. Uh, yeah, I mean seriously. All right. Here is This is one of the first presidents of Nigeria. They killed a bunch of leaders, presidents in Nigeria. You know, see, and this is the thing. If you talk to Nigerians here, you would be surprised at how little they know about their own history. Because a lot of times, the only Nigerians who get to come here are those who've been raised properly. Either they were raised by the Catholics, or they went to schools where they were taught only a certain narrow history, and just like they teach them only certain things about us, yeah, about black people here. This is Murtala Ramat Muhammad, and he was assassinated in 1976. Okay, like I say, they had a long history of killing people, killing leaders in Nigeria. Here is Marion Ngwabe. Ngwabi. He was the president of the Republic of Congo in Brazzaville. Uh, Young man, and yeah, they killed him too. They had a lot of assassinations going on in the whole area of the Congo because between Portugal and France, you see Republic of the Congo there, and you see Democratic Republic of the Congo, right? Yeah, they were fighting over that territory like crazy, and their thing was See, again, I hope you're beginning to see a pattern here. With all these leaders being killed, what do you think? The other part of this is that the propaganda that was being set out about these countries, because the way the West played it is like, look at those Africans. They're killing each other and they're stealing the money, they're this and they're corrupt. You see, the propaganda was one set way that all of these leaders were either dictators and they were killed by other dictators. All of them couldn't have been dictators. But that's the steady propaganda we were given to the point where we don't know any other stories. All right? Now, here's a case of somebody we do know about, at least something. His name was Stephen Biko. Stephen Biko, he was known as the father of the Black consciousness movement in South Africa. And we even had a movie made about him. Uh, Denzel played him. Um, but I want to give you a couple of things about Stephen Biko. Number one, he was young. And if you notice, a lot of these leaders that they were killing were young, right? Stephen Biko came from a very, very poor part of South Africa. Of course it was, because, if you know the history of South Africa, under apartheid, they did a number. But now he went to school, he went to college. I think he was gonna be a doctor. But in any case, he he decided, well, he was forced to really. He became more and more of a leader and trying to awaken his people. And he pushed the idea of black is beautiful. He talked about what was necessary. Look at this. This is some of the statistics during apartheid. Okay, and it'll come back so you get a chance to see it, even read it even better. But look at this: 19 million black people, 4.5 million whites. Whites had 87% of the land, 75% of the national income. Okay, it ain't changed that much since they got independence or repealed. Increases racial discrimination. How's that for propaganda, right? um, the Black consciousness movement that was greatly feared in South Africa during apartheid. You have to understand. You're going to see something in a minute, and I want you to catch some of it because it so scared them so badly that they took. They kept arresting him. They'd arrest him and beat him up, but finally, they arrested him this last time. They beat him so severely that they were forced to have to take him to a hospital, but they took him to the hospital a long way. I'm talking about way long way. It took him hours, and he basically died on the way there or as soon as he got there. Well, if you get a chance, come back and look at this, scroll through this. That was deep. Okay. Um, when Stephen Biko died and they had his funeral, over 20,000 people came to his funeral. I want you to watch this for a second because you're going to see something a little bit later on where there's another funeral of a leader of a country. And you're going to notice the similarity of how the funeral is carried out. Um, and this is Stephen Biko during apartheid, where just assembling like this was illegal. But it was so many people, they couldn't stop it because they were determined to bury the brother. Look at the fist on his casket. They were determined to bury the brother with dignity, and so they did, even though they were oppressed. Now I want you to watch something here, just for a few seconds, of him in his voice. Okay? And then ask yourself, was he so much of a threat that they had to beat him to death?
We see a completely non-racial society. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law. So in a sense, it will be a completely non-racial egalitarian society. But will the vast
Yes. Steve Biko, give honor to the brother. This is it's kind of interesting here. This is Ali Soli. He's a former president of Comoros or Comoros. I say Comoros, but it might be Comoros. There's it on the map. Okay, he was the president of Comoros, and he was assassinated. Okay, now when he was assassinated, this brother became president. His name was Ahmed Abdallah, and he became president. Now let's see. The last guy, Ali, he was assassinated in 1978, and Ahmed Abdallah took over. And in 1989, he was shot dead in his office during a coup led by the last president's half brother, Saeed Mohammed Dohar. And Dohar took control of the country the next day, a little country called Comoros. So, yeah, they kept that right in the family. They were like right here. Okay? Now, here's something that I'll never forget this. His brother's name was Anwar Sadat. I did not know until he was killed that Anwar Sadat was a black man. Now, back then, this is going back to the late the 70s, and he was president of Egypt. And when you look at him, and doesn't he look like an African? Because you know they like to try and play like Egypt is somewhere else. They like to call it in the Middle East. It ain't in the Middle East. It's in Africa. All right. But we saw so little of him in this country. Most of us didn't know he was black. Now I'm gonna show you in a minute. I'm gonna show you a video, and I want you just to watch it because the way he was killed, it was right out front at a big ceremony. Watch this. It's deep how he was killed. And then you'll see at his funeral all the leaders from around the world. Some of them you'll recognize. But also watch the funeral part that's on here because I just mentioned it about with Steve Biko. Watch this. You see Kissinger, you see Nixon. Yeah, that's D1. They killed him right out in the middle of everywhere. The soldiers got off the shot him, started shooting up there in the stands, and just see, this is the thing that the boldness of the assassinations was unbelievable, and yet we had little or no knowledge of this, little or no knowledge. Okay, here is oh yeah, this is William Richard Tolbert, the president of Liberia. Now here's what we need to understand about this. Now let's understand about Liberia. Liberia was an African country where back in the 1800s, after the Civil War, um, some folks decided to send some Africans back to Africa. But rather than send them back to where they came from, they took over a part of a country called Liberia, and they made this the place to send the black folks. In fact, they named the capital name. The name of the capital is Monrovia, after President Monroe. And so from that point on, like they hijacked the country, and so you had these African Africans who had been enslaved in the United States, sent them over there, and made them the heads of the country over the indigenous Liberians. Now, William Richard Tolbert, he was the grandson of a former American slave from South Carolina who immigrated to Liberia in the Liberian Exodus of 1878. The Tolbert clan was one of the largest Americo-Liberian families in Liberia. Okay? That's what they call them, Americo-Liberians. And they ran the country over the indigenous Liberians. Now, he was overthrown in a violent coup d'etat led by a guy by the name of Samuel K. Doe. He's going to come up again in a few minutes. All right? But I want you to know about him because he's going to come back. Now, here's a case that is really deep. Samora Machel. Samora Machel, he was the first president of Mozambique. There's a picture of him. There's a picture of him there. The first president of Mozambique. Understand this, okay? After all that long fight, and he died in a plane crash. He and 33 others were killed in a plane crash in 1986. He was on his way back to Maputo from, I believe it was from South Africa. Yeah, he was. He was leaving South Africa. They had a meeting. And remember, it's 1986, so you still had apartheid in 1986. Okay? Nelson Mandela was not out of prison yet. He didn't get out to what, 90, 91? And the plane never reached Maputo. In fact, it actually got crashed just inside of South Africa. Okay? That really hurt Mozambique for a long time. But now here's why you see Nelson Mandela in these graphics. Samora Machel was killed in 1986. 12 years later, Nelson Mandela was out of prison. He was president. And he married Graca. Graca Machel was Samora Machel's wife. And so, see, they all knew each other way back in the day, all of them. Before Nelson Mandela went to prison, all of that. But now what's so beautiful about this is now, of course, Nelson Mandela got out of prison. He and Winnie, they stayed together for a minute, but then they decided to get a divorce. and then he uh, married Graca. Well, Graca and Winnie got along fine. There was none of that hating between them, and they were very close. And Graca took care of Nelson all the way up to his death. Now, Graca also became the first, as far as we know, only woman in Africa to be the first lady of two different countries, because she was first lady in Mozambique with Samora Machel, and she was first lady of South Africa with Nelson. But we never forgave them for killing Samora Machel. That was the South Africans, the white apartheid South Africans. Okay? Now I got to tell you about, and I'm almost finished, but I got to tell you about Dulcie September. Dulcie September. Now, Dulcie September, she was the head of the ANC, the African National Congress. Yeah, she was a bad lady. And she was, now remember in 88, this 1988, ANC was still basically illegal and apartheid was still in full effect. But she was traveling the world to bring attention to um, the South African struggle. In March of 1988, she was in Paris. She was there investigating. They were doing a lot of arms trafficking from France into South Africa. They were helping the South Africans. And she was assassinated outside of the ANC office. She was shot 5 times from behind with the 22 caliber silenced rifle as she was opening the ANC office after collecting the mail. She was 53 years old at the time of her assassination. She was so well known and very much loved. In fact, so much that they have a plaque honoring her in Paris, France. That's where that marker is. Dulcie September. And I just love that name, don't you? Uh, but again, someone else we didn't know anything about. Okay, and we honor her too. All right. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago about about where is it? I mentioned about Samuel K. Doe. Okay. Now, Samuel K. Doe. Oh, Samuel K. Doe led a violent coup against William Richard Talbot, president of Liberia, and so Samuel K. Doe became president. Okay. But now check this out. He was president of Liberia, and along comes a guy named Charles Taylor. Charles Taylor led a coup against Samuel K. Doe. But now Charles Taylor is a very interesting brother. You may have heard about him because Charles Taylor, that's him right there. Charles, that's Samuel K. Doe, right there. But Charles Taylor, he was basically a CIA asset. And when I say asset, I mean that seriously, like this. Charles Taylor was in Liberia, and then he fled Liberia because he stole a bunch of money. And where did he go? He came to the United States. Now, while he was in the United States, he was locked up for stealing this money. He was in jail, in prison, in the United States. He was broken out of prison, him and another person, broken out of prison in the United States and out of the country. back over to Liberia. And then he went from Liberia over to a little country called and led a violent coup against Samuel K. Doe. Now, eventually, Charles Taylor was arrested and charged with war crimes. And he was tried at The Hague, and he claimed he was part of the CIA. That CIA broke him out of prison in the United States, y'all, and got him out and took him back over to Liberia. And I believe that he was sent to Libya to spy on one Muammar Gaddafi. But I mention this because of this. See, people think this is a joke, that we see stuff in the movies about people being broke out of jails and prisons and being flown around the world and being used in different countries. And we think that black people ain't part of that. No, we are. Charles Taylor is a perfect example, because at the time when he was broken out of prison, you could not convince 12 black people in this country that the CIA did anything like that. Now, understand, the CIA is forbidden from doing things within the United States. It's supposed to only do stuff outside the United States. But they broke him out of prison and took him all the way back over to Africa. Okay? So understand how this works. All right? Speaking of Libya and Muammar Gaddafi, we all know the story about him, but let's make sure that you understand this. Muammar Gaddafi was murdered in 2011. Now, the sad part is, some months before, he was over here visiting with a certain President Obama, shook his hand and everything, and they smiled. And our beloved President Obama was part of the deal that went down that killed him, killed Gaddafi. I'm going to show you a brief news thing about the attack on Muammar Gaddafi. Now, I want you to pay close attention, because in the beginning of this news feature, they talk about how there was a caravan of vehicles. They said using drones and fighter planes. They attacked that caravan. All right? Now listen, watch this and listen carefully.
Gaddafi's end began when an American drone, part of a NATO attack, stopped a convoy leaving Gaddafi's hometown. David Martin has been talking to sources at the Pentagon and lays out what happened.
This morning, French warplanes and an American Predator drone attacked a giant convoy of more than 100 four-wheel drive vehicles fleeing west out of Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte. The convoy tried to evade the aircraft by splitting into smaller parts, but at least 15 of them were hit and their occupants killed. The vehicle, which turned out to be carrying Gaddafi, was damaged but not destroyed. He and his bodyguards abandoned the vehicle and took cover in drainage pipes running under the highway, where they were cornered by a band of anti-Gaddafi fighters. Already festooned with graffiti, this is where Gaddafi, who once lived in splendor, made his last stand. Who shot him is still a mystery. According to one account, it was his own bodyguards, one of whom can be seen lying dead on the ground. Presumably, they wanted to spare him from being captured. Grandiose to the end, Gaddafi was armed with a golden pistol, which is now a prize trophy for rebels who 8 months ago didn't stand a chance against one of the world's most repressive regimes. As this gruesome video shows, Gaddafi was taken alive and handled roughly. Whether he would have survived his wounds with better treatment is not known. One of his sons was also killed today, and another reported captured. With most of Gaddafi's inner circle either dead, captured, or in exile, NATO, after flying more than 26,000 missions, can now end its bombing campaign. That could happen as soon as tomorrow, although reconnaissance flights are likely to continue a while longer.
Gaddafi.
Wow. You notice the difference between how some of these leaders have been killed. They go out of their way to make sure that they're killed in ugly ways, right? Sometimes they destroy the bodies, right? Who is it? What's his name over there in Iraq? We never saw his body, right? They said they buried him at sea. But Muammar Gaddafi, they wanted to humiliate him and destroy his legacy. He really did. This is the last one. And here's where I really want you to pay attention closely, because what I'm going to do is this. There was a brother by the name of Thomas Sankara, or Sankara. I say Sankara. I believe they pronounce it Sankara. He was 33 years old when he was assassinated. Brother was bad. Brother was so bad. And he became president of a country called Burkina Faso. He renamed it Burkina Faso. It meant land of the upright man, or a land of upright people. And in a few years, I think it was 4 years he had, he did so much in turning that country around. And at 33, they didn't just kill him. They staged a coup on him where they killed him and 12 of his cabinet. The coup was organized by his former colleague named Blaise Compaoré. They dismembered his body, and then they buried him in an unmarked grave. Now later they went back, his wife and other supporters finally got his body, or at least what was left of his body, and buried him again. I mean, Thomas Sankara was a bad brother. He was a bad brother. And he's a symbol of what is so good about young black men. There's a picture of him when he got married to Marion. But now he's now commemorated every year in ceremonies that take place in Burkina Faso, Mali, Senegal, Niger, Tanzania, Burundi, France, Canada, and the United States, although most people here still don't know who he is. But here's what I want you to do for the next 5 minutes or so. He gave a speech at a meeting of the African countries. And he speaks in French, but there's subtitles. So I want you to pay close attention to what he says. This was in 1986. In fact, he says in this brief excerpt, he says he talks about why African countries do not owe a debt to European countries. Okay? And why it's so important that they unite and not pay the debt. Because he said debt is killing us. But he also says, if we don't do this together, I won't be here for the next meeting. And he wasn't. But I want you to listen carefully, or read carefully. And you can listen to him because you can feel him. You can feel him. And that'll close us out pretty much. Because it's like this was 1986 when he gave this speech. He was killed in 1987, 33 years old. Thomas Sankara.
Ma proposition n'est pas non plus, je ne voudrais pas que l'on prenne la proposition du Burkina Faso comme celle qui viendrait de la part de jeunes sans maturité, sans expérience. Je ne voudrais pas non plus que l'on pense qu'il n'y a que les révolutionnaires à parler de cette façon. Je voudrais que l'on admette que c'est simplement l'objectivité et l'obligation. Et je peux citer, dans les exemples de ceux qui ont dit de ne pas payer la dette, des révolutionnaires comme des non-révolutionnaires, des jeunes comme des vieux. Je citerai par exemple, Fidel Castro a déjà dit de ne pas payer. Il n'a pas mon âge, même s'il est révolutionnaire. Mais je pourrais citer également François Mitterrand, qui a dit que les pays africains ne peuvent pas payer, les pays pauvres ne peuvent pas. Je pourrais citer Madame le Premier ministre. Je ne connais pas son âge et je m'en voudrais de le lui demander. Mais c'est un exemple. Je voudrais citer également le président Félix Houphouët-Boigny. Il n'a pas mon âge. Cependant, il a déclaré officiellement, publiquement, qu'au moins pour ce qui concerne son pays, la Côte d'Ivoire ne peut pas payer. Or, la Côte d'Ivoire est classée parmi les pays les plus aisés d'Afrique, au moins d'Afrique francophone. C'est pourquoi d'ailleurs il est normal qu'elle paye plus en contribution ici. Mais, Monsieur le Président, ce n'est donc pas de la provocation. Je voudrais que très sagement, vous nous offriez des solutions. Je voudrais que notre conférence adopte la nécessité de dire clairement que nous ne pouvons pas payer la dette. Non pas dans un esprit belliqueux, belliciste. Ceci pour éviter que nous n'allions individuellement nous faire assassiner. Si le Burkina Faso tout seul refuse de payer la dette, je ne serai pas là à la prochaine conférence. Par contre, avec le soutien de tous, dont j'ai besoin, avec le soutien de tous, nous pourrons éviter de payer. Et en évitant de payer, nous pourrons à notre développement. Et je voudrais terminer en disant, chaque fois qu'un pays africain achète une arme, c'est contre un Africain. Ce n'est pas contre un Européen. Ce n'est pas contre un Asiatique. C'est contre un Africain. Par conséquent, nous devons également, dans la lancée de la résolution de la question de la dette, trouver une solution au problème de l'armement. Je suis militaire et je porte une arme. Mais Monsieur le Président, je voudrais que nous nous désarmions. Parce que moi, je porte l'unique arme que je possède et d'autres ont camouflé les armes qu'ils ont. Alors, chers frères, avec le soutien de tous, nous pourrons faire la paix chez nous. Nous pourrons également utiliser ces immenses potentialités pour développer l'Afrique, parce que notre sol, notre sous-sol sont riches. Nous avons suffisamment de bras et nous avons un marché immense, très vaste, du nord au sud, de l'est à l'ouest. Nous avons suffisamment de capacités intellectuelles pour créer, ou tout au moins prendre la technologie et la science partout où nous pourrons les trouver. Monsieur le Président, faisons en sorte que nous mettions au point ce front uni d'Addis Abeba contre la dette. Faisons en sorte que ce soit à partir d'Addis Abeba que nous décidions de limiter la course aux armements entre pays faibles et pauvres. Les gourdins et les coutelas que nous achetons sont inutiles. Faisons en sorte également que le marché africain soit le marché des Africains. Produire en Afrique, transformer en Afrique et consommer en Afrique. Produisons ce dont nous avons besoin et consommons ce que nous produisons au lieu d'importer. Le Burkina Faso est venu vous exposer ici la cotonnade produite au Burkina Faso, tissée au Burkina Faso, cousue au Burkina Faso pour habiller les Burkinabés. Ma délégation et moi-même, nous sommes habillés par nos tisserands, nos paysans. Il n'y a pas un seul fil qui vienne de l'Europe ou de l'Amérique. je ne fais pas un défilé de mode, mais je voudrais simplement dire que nous devons accepter de vivre africain. C'est la seule façon de vivre libre et de vivre digne. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président. La patrie ou la mort, nous vaincrons.